Oh, don't mind him. He just tags along sometimes. That was how she introduced me. Her husband, the man who paid the down payment on her first office, who stayed up night after night printing pitch decks, she took credit for. The man who answered her boss's call when she was too drunk to drive back from that retreat in Santa Barbara. The same man who held her hand through 2 miscarriages, bought her mother's silence with a kitchen remodel, and nodded politely through every smug little toast about independent women at those team dinners I wasn't invited to anymore. But this was different. She said it with a smile, said it while fixing her hair, said it like I was an Uber driver who just happened to wander into the catered section of the vineyard. And they laughed, her boss, his assistant, that red-haired project manager who kept clinging to her arm like a barnacle with fake lashes. They all laughed. One of them even raised his glass like he was toasting to the punchline. And I did nothing. No scene. No outburst. Just a handshake and a quiet step out to the gravel path behind the patio. The sky was clear. The wine smelled acidic. I heard someone mention IPO timelines behind me. I heard someone else say my wife's name with a little too much softness. They didn't know who I was. She hadn't told them. Or maybe she had, just not the truth. Maybe I was just the guy who refilled the fridge and walked the dog. The strange part? I wasn't even angry. Just hollow. Like a glass that had finally stopped pretending it wasn't cracked. You want to know the moment a marriage ends? It's not always the big fight. It's not the affair, though there was that too. It's the second your partner publicly decides you don't matter. That you're a footnote. A prop. It was a tiny sentence, but it split something wide open. And if you've made it this far, if this sounds painfully familiar, hit subscribe. Seriously, over 90% of people who follow these stories never do, and that's what keeps this team going. Especially when we're digging into the stuff nobody talks about at brunch tables like that one. Anyway, back to the vineyard. I stood there for a long time, staring at the rows of grapes and wondering how long I'd been pretending. Pretending that her success was our success. That being sidelined was temporary. That she'd turn around eventually and remember who stood in the crowd every time she got another plaque. But the truth is, some people get so addicted to applause, they stop seeing the hands that clapped for them when no one else did. When I walked back toward the building, I caught her reflection in the glass. She was still laughing, and her hand was on his arm now. The boss. Not in a romantic way. Not yet. But it was too familiar. Too casual. The kind of touch you practice on someone when you want to test boundaries before crossing them. I'd seen it before. On her. And on the woman she hated most. Her sister. Her boss turned, noticed me. He nodded politely, the way you nod to a caterer or valet. Still no clue who I was. Perfect. Because a funny thing happens when people erase you. You're free to rewrite the story. Quietly. Methodically. With no expectation, no guilt, no spotlight. And in my case, I had a very specific pen I planned to use. I hadn't spoken to Roland Pierce in 6 years. Not since he left our firm to start his own boutique shop down in Raleigh. Gray hair, sharp suits, and a talent for sniffing out skeletons buried beneath million-dollar veneers. The kind of guy whose idea of fun was cross-referencing SEC filings on a Friday night. He was the last name on my list. Not because he was unimportant. Because he was final. The big red button you don't push unless you're ready to watch it all burn. Quietly, legally, beautifully. I stood by the parking lot wall, half shadowed by the tall hedges behind the vineyard. Wedding music was playing somewhere off in the distance. Her boss and his team had moved back indoors, sipping rose and planning fiscal domination. My wife, still glowing, was holding court like she always did. Like nothing could touch her. Like the rules didn't apply because she'd learned to smile through consequences. I opened my old cloud account. The one she didn't know still existed. I'd made a copy of everything 3 years ago when her behavior first shifted. Not the obvious stuff. Not texts or affairs. No, the little things. A sudden drop in joint expenses. Random wire transfers from a Payoneer account I didn't recognize. Her bizarre interest in procurement firms I knew she used to hate. When I first asked about it back then, she laughed. You're just being paranoid. It's all your work stress. Maybe you should take a break. I did. From her. Now I scrolled through my archive files and pulled up the one titled Backup_Documents_2019. A tidy little folder. In it, a memo I drafted but never sent. A 2-page breakdown of her overlapping consulting arrangements, conflicting vendor stakes, and an unexplained equity position in a shell company that had only one client, her. I updated it with a fresh summary at the top and a quick note to Roland. If you're still in the business of integrity, I've got something for you. Just enough smoke to find the fire. Then I texted him one line. Check your inbox. You'll want to call me after you read it. I didn't wait long. My phone buzzed barely 90 seconds later. Roland's voice, low and deliberate, like a man reading a loaded gun's instruction manual, came through. How long have you known? I took a breath. Long enough. You sure you want to do this? She made her choice today, Roland. Silence on the other end. Then a soft, satisfied grunt. Then I'll make mine. Click. That was it. No contracts. No drama. Just quiet precision. Roland had worked with half the major compliance bodies in the eastern U.S. He wasn't the kind of guy who sent emails with his name in the footer. He was the guy who received them, usually CC'd to 3 government departments and 1 very panicked boardroom. And now, she was on his radar. It felt surgical, like removing a tumor without anesthesia. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just watched the progress bar on my phone as the email sent and thought. So this is what power feels like when it isn't loud. Because that's the thing people like my wife never understood. Some men don't shout. Some men don't threaten. They wait. They observe. And when they act, it's not to punish, it's to end. In chess, we used to call it zugzwang. A position where every move your opponent makes only makes things worse. That's what I'd set in motion. Her next step would be into a trap, no matter where she moved. And she wouldn't even know she was playing until her queen was already gone. That night, I dug through the hall closet. Not the front one she curated for guests, but the one with the busted vacuum, mismatched wires, and a plastic tub labeled Old Tech. Buried underneath a tangle of HDMI cords and a dead router was my old Dell Latitude. Heavy, scratched, dusty. She used to joke it was the only thing in the house older than our wedding photos. Funny, both aged the same way, poorly. I booted it up. Took forever. Fan wheezing like it had asthma. But it worked. The drive mounted. Password still the same. She used to dump everything on here, back when she still asked me to look over vendor statements and double-check bid amounts before her presentations. I was the built-in safety net, human version of IT support, until I stopped being useful and started being background. I navigated to an old folder named Q4 Private. It hadn't been touched since 2020. Inside, chaos. PDF contracts with terrible file names. Scans of paper invoices. Screenshots of emails. Most of it was noise, but I knew what to look for. The shell company wasn't hard to spot, Aldercore Strategies. Supposedly a boutique logistics consultant. But it didn't exist before 2019, and it only had one client, the firm my wife worked for. I remembered the name because I caught her once editing a contract and mumbling. Aldercore markup looks clean, just don't use the same font again. She never realized I had auto backup enabled. A quick keyword search pulled it up. There it was, an email chain between her and a burner Gmail tied to David R., her ex, the one she claimed had moved to Canada. Apparently, Canada now includes Delaware, because that's where Aldercore was registered. She wasn't just forwarding contracts. She was rewriting scopes of work, inflating hours, and padding compliance language, making sure bids landed where they were meant to. And she signed things. Sloppy. Overconfident. Like someone who thought being charming was the same as being untouchable. I compiled the worst of it. Emails, contract snippets, disbursement records tied to her secondary Venmo account, which she once used to split Pilates with a friend, the same friend who called her babe in the memo field. I packaged it all into a single file, encrypted it, named it overties.pdf, then opened a clean email window. To Roland Pierce. CC. Greg.Walters at her boss's firm domain. Subject. Due diligence materials, urgent. No message body. No signature. Just the attachment. It was the digital equivalent of leaving a loaded gun on the table, then stepping out of the room. They could decide who picked it up first. The moment I hit send, the screen felt lighter. Like the file didn't just leave the laptop, it left me. You'd think I'd feel guilt. But no, just a strange clarity. I wasn't nuking a marriage. I was holding up a mirror and letting them all see what they'd chosen not to. Because here's the truth. People like my wife don't implode. They unravel. Quietly. Elegantly. One silk thread at a time. And I had just pulled the first one. Monday morning, 7:12 a.m. She came down the stairs in a fitted navy blouse she hadn't worn since the product launch in Phoenix. Hair curled. Perfume a little heavier than usual. She twirled once in front of the mirror, like a teenager rehearsing confidence. I think Greg's finally seeing the value I bring, she said, smoothing the hem of her shirt. He's copying me on strategy emails now. I think a promotion's in the air. I looked up from my coffee. You've always been persuasive. She grinned, half flattered, half smug, and poured herself a protein shake with almond butter and whatever else the algorithm told her was vital. She kissed me lightly on the cheek. Let's not be weird after yesterday, okay? It was a brunch, not a roast. Nothing weird about being invisible, I replied. She laughed like it was a joke, then grabbed her bag and left. I took my time, showered, got dressed, didn't go to my office. Instead, I drove downtown and parked a block away from her building. Parallel spot, perfect view of the glass doors and the main walkway. I brought a travel mug and the kind of patience only someone truly done with pretending can carry. She arrived at 8:51, entered through the side employee entrance, already chatting on the phone. Probably work-related, probably strategy. By 9:10, I'd seen 3 more familiar faces enter. Her boss, Greg Walters, came through the front entrance with a Bluetooth in one ear and a tablet in hand. Same man who shook my hand like I was a hotel bellhop. The one she'd casually clung to when she thought I wasn't looking. At 9:43, Roland sent a text. Received. No response yet, but eyes are on it. Stay close. At 10:02, I watched Greg step outside. Not leisurely, not for a smoke or a coffee. He was pacing, phone pressed hard against his ear, other hand on his hip like he was trying to physically hold the situation together. He didn't notice me. Why would he? I was nobody, just the guy who tags along. Then it happened. 10:14 a.m. sharp. He stopped mid-step. His eyes locked on something in the distance. No, someone. His entire posture shifted. I saw his lips move slowly. What? And then louder. What did you tell him? He turned, scanning wildly. Like the walls had moved. Like the world had shifted and nobody had sent him the memo. I lifted my coffee and took a long, quiet sip. Dark roast. No sugar. His call ended with a hard stab of the screen. He stood still for a second, the way people do when they're trying to calculate how much trouble they're in without showing panic. Then he stormed back inside. I didn't move, just leaned back in the seat and looked up at the sky. Clear again, like yesterday. Except now the clouds were gathering, just not the kind you see on weather apps. She didn't know it yet, but she was already living in the aftermath. It wasn't the kind of storm you hear coming. It was the kind you realize has been flooding under your door for hours. And it had her name on every drop. She came home 4 hours early. No text, no call. The garage door slammed shut like a thread, and her heels clicked across the tile faster than usual. I stayed in the kitchen, still chopping onions for a dinner I no longer planned on sharing. The purse hit the granite countertop with a thud, hard enough that her sunglasses flew out and skidded to the floor. They locked me out. She snapped, breath short, eyes wild. My badge, my email, everything. I tried to log into the internal vendor dashboard and got an access denied screen. HR called it a temporary suspension pending ethics review. What the hell is going on? She was pale. Not the kind of pale that comes from shock. The kind that creeps in when someone's realizing this isn't a misunderstanding. This is exposure. I let the silence settle. Then I said, without looking up, that's strange. She stared at me, waiting, wounded, and beneath it all, terrified. You don't seem surprised. I wiped my hands, tossed the knife in the sink. I'm not the one with compromised access. Why would I be surprised? She pulled out her phone, called Greg. Voicemail. Then again, still voicemail. This can't be happening, she muttered, pacing like a lab rat that suddenly noticed the glass walls. We're presenting to a potential international partner next week. I've been leading that deal for months. They can't freeze me out without a hearing. I poured myself a drink. Small splash of bourbon. No ice. Finally, she stopped pacing and turned. Did you talk to anyone? I took a sip, then smiled. You introduced me yesterday as someone who just tags along. Remember? Her mouth opened like she was about to say something. Some excuse, some performance, but it didn't come. Her jaw shut again, then opened, then shut once more. Like her whole vocabulary had been rebooted and couldn't load the program. She dropped onto the bar stool and just stared into space. Cheeks flushed, throat twitching like she was trying to swallow a scream. I watched her crumble from the inside out. Arrogance dissolving. Certainty eroding. She'd always thought the worst that could happen was a reprimand. A firm email. Maybe a transfer to a less sexy department. She never imagined real consequences. She built her career like a house of cards. Sleek, fragile, camera-ready. And now someone had opened the window. What did you do? She whispered finally. I just shrugged. I stopped tagging along. There was a long silence. You could almost hear the weight shifting in her mind. Trying to recall every corner she'd cut, every favor she called in, every back-channel deal she pretended didn't leave a trail. She didn't yet realize that the trail led straight to her inbox. That every keystroke she thought was invisible was now someone's printed exhibit. That the people she used, her ex, her consultants, her fall guys, had stopped protecting her the moment things got inconvenient. And that the one person she dismissed as irrelevant was the only one who saw it all coming. Wednesday morning. She wore gray. No makeup. No jewelry. Hair pulled into a tight bun that told me she was trying to look neutral. The corporate version of a surrender flag. She didn't say goodbye when she left. Just quietly closed the door like she didn't want to wake whatever was already crumbling. I watched from the upstairs window as she backed out of the driveway slower than usual. By 11 a.m., I got the update. Roland sent one message. They pulled her. The firm didn't call her in for a meeting. They called her in to pack. Her keycard didn't work at the glass turnstiles anymore. A junior HR rep met her in the lobby with a security badge and a blank visitor sticker. Her walk of shame? Through the open concept floor she once ruled like a kingdom. Past the same colleagues she used to mentor, charm, manipulate. Not one of them made eye contact. They gave her a cardboard box with handles and escorted her to her office. Glass walls, spotless desk, 2 plants I used to water when she forgot. She started gathering things in silence. Then realized half her stuff was already gone. The framed award from the vendor conference? Missing. The commemorative plaque from her first $1 million deal? Gone. They had started erasing her before she even arrived. At 12:14 p.m., I got another ping from Roland. She's lawyered up. Firm's unbothered. Why? Because they didn't need a courtroom. They had the receipts. Invoices sent to Aldercore and 2 other shell companies registered in neighboring states. Email chains that outlined quiet referral deals with former clients. Internal correspondence where she casually offered to grease procurement decisions in exchange for consulting fees. But the worst part, the one that made her lawyers go silent? An internal message she sent to her ex-partner at Aldercore, forwarded back to the ethics committee by someone who'd clearly been sitting on it for months. We pushed the higher bid. I'll handle the internal objections. This client is loyal. We can extract more. Just keep it off books and let me know when the wire lands. And she signed it. First name, last initial, on a corporate device. The firm had everything. They didn't just catch her with smoke. They walked her back to the fire and made her name every match. By Thursday morning, her profile was gone from the company's website. No farewell post. No press release. Just deleted. Even worse. Her name was flagged in their internal vendor portal. If any partner tried to process a contract she was associated with, a compliance pop-up appeared. Warning, ethics violation. Contact legal before proceeding. She wasn't just fired. She was radioactive. She called me that afternoon, sitting in the driveway with the engine still running. She didn't even come inside. I watched from the upstairs window again, just like in the morning. She looked up toward the house once, then back at her phone. The screen lit her face just enough for me to see her mouth moving, but I didn't answer. She sat there a long time, just staring at the steering wheel. Like maybe, if she didn't move, none of it would be real. But it was. And the paper trail? Didn't care who she used to be. Saturday night. Rain tapping on the windows. I was sitting in the den, reading the paper I used to never have time for. Now suddenly a peaceful ritual. She was curled up on the couch across from me, wrapped in a throw blanket like she could hide inside it. No makeup. No earrings. Still in sweatpants from the morning. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her this quiet for this long. Then her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a notification, group text. One of those cheerful corporate chains that used to blow up her phone all hours of the night. She swiped it open with mild curiosity. I saw her expression shift. She froze, thumb hovering midair. Her face tightened as she stared. I could see the reflection of the image in her pupils, recognition, disbelief, and then something uglier, replacement. It was a group photo, taken at the Dorian, her favorite overpriced steakhouse. The one she used to joke was more of an office than the actual office. Her team, her people, except she wasn't there. Everyone else was. Greg, the boss, front and center, smiling like a man who'd just been unburdened. On his left, that red-haired project manager clinking a martini glass. Her old deputy, the one she mentored. Even the intern she used to mock for always forgetting printer codes. They were all there. Without her. And in the background, her old chair. The one she always claimed was hers at team events. Empty. The caption under the photo? Simple. New chapter. Stronger team. She stared at it for several seconds too long. Then she hurled the phone across the room. It hit the wall with a dull smack and tumbled to the carpet. Didn't shatter. Just lay there, face down, like even it didn't want to look at her. I gave them years, she spat, more to herself than to me. Her voice cracked on the last word. I kept reading. Page 3, business section. Irony. After a moment, I folded the newspaper and looked up. Funny, I said, setting it on the armrest. You said the same thing about me. Her eyes flicked to me like a reflex. But she didn't answer. Because she remembered. She remembered all the times she brushed me off to stay late for team building. All the birthdays I spent alone while she toasted promotions with people who'd now cropped her out of frame. All the late-night wine-fueled rants about loyalty and hard work, delivered by a woman who couldn't return either. Now those same people were smiling in tailored suits, toasting a future without her. And they didn't even bother to blur her out. They simply moved on. That's the thing about power built on charm and convenience. It evaporates the second it's no longer useful. She thought they'd mourn her absence. Instead, they photoshopped her right out of their world. She wasn't just unwelcome now. She was unnecessary. And for the first time since this began, she finally understood what it feels like to be the one standing on the outside. Watching someone else take your place, your seat, your glass. Only difference? I didn't throw my phone when it happened to me. I just made a call. Sunday morning. The house was too quiet. She'd barely slept. I could tell by the dark hollows under her eyes and the way she kept refilling a coffee cup she never drank from. The television was on, but muted. CNBC running loops of market headlines no one in this house cared about anymore. I sat on the back porch with a book, pretending to read. The sky was a flat, disinterested gray, the kind of morning that made silence feel louder. She was on the couch, scrolling endlessly, probably checking for updates that would never come. Apologies that weren't written. Explanations no one owed her. Then her phone buzzed. Not a chime. A deep vibration, the kind that cuts straight through bone when you're already on edge. She picked it up cautiously, like it might explode. One line. No contact name. No ID. Just, didn't think you'd be so sloppy. Good luck explaining Clause 14. Her reaction was instant. The color drained from her face like someone had pulled a lever. She shot up from the couch and shouted into the room like someone had set her skin on fire. Who sent this? She turned in circles, like the message had come from inside the walls. Her breathing was short, sharp. Her hand clutched the phone so tightly I thought it might snap in half. I watched through the sliding glass door, silent. Clause 14. She knew what it was. And so did I. It wasn't just a throwaway line. It was the clause buried in the vendor compliance charter she'd helped write, but never thought anyone would weaponize. It specifically barred employees from financially benefiting, directly or indirectly, from third-party contracts not disclosed to the board. Guess what Aldercore was? Roland had forwarded the entire package to the National Ethics Committee for Corporate Compliance. It wasn't just her company anymore. It was her license, her credentials, her whole industry reputation. Clause 14 was the kill switch. She stormed into the dining room, pulled her laptop from the charger, and began typing furiously. Emails. I could guess who. Mentors. Colleagues. The people she used to call her circle. Silence. She tried again. And again. Nothing. Some read receipts. But no replies. Her old VP? Opened the message. Didn't respond. Her conference speaking contact? Viewed. Ignored. She even emailed her graduate program advisor, the one who once called her a rising star. Nothing. It was like watching someone fall through ice and realizing no one's throwing a rope. She slammed the laptop shut, stood still for a moment, then opened it again. More messages. Desperation now, raw and obvious. She wasn't just panicking. She was unraveling. The isolation was surgical. No public condemnation. Just the kind of silence that burns hotter than outrage. The kind that says, we know what you are. We just don't need to say it out loud. That's how real reputations die. Not with lawsuits. With exclusion. She came into the kitchen holding the phone like it was radioactive. Did you send this? I looked up from my book. Send what? She held it up, trembling. I leaned back in the chair and shrugged. I'm just the guy who tags along, remember? She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just turned, walked to the sink, and stared out the window. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I saw her shoulders drop. Not in exhaustion, but in surrender. The fight had left her. The war, however, wasn't quite done. She didn't knock. She didn't ease into the conversation or build her case. She stormed in. Hair a mess. Phone still in hand. Eyes wild with something between grief and fury. Like someone who just realized the call was coming from inside the house. You planned this, she hissed, voice shaking. I looked up from the dining table, where I was reassembling the broken cabinet drawer she'd ignored for 3 years. A domestic act, precise and quiet. The kind you do when you're reclaiming space inch by inch. She stepped closer. Don't play dumb. You've been sitting on this for how long? Roland? The ethics board? Clause 14? You think I don't know your fingerprints are all over this? I set the screwdriver down, finally meeting her eyes. There was no point in the silence anymore. You made a career pretending you did it all alone, I said evenly. I was your shadow, your support system, your excuse, and your alibi. She flinched, just slightly. The word alibi landed harder than she expected. I stood, walked past her, opened the drawer near the bookshelf, the one with old chargers and unused USB sticks, and pulled out a small voice recorder. Simple, gray, the same kind she used to borrow when rehearsing presentations. I handed it to her without a word. She looked down at it, confused. There's one file on it, I said. You'll recognize the voice. She didn't press play immediately, just stood there like the plastic casing might bite her. Then finally, thumb trembling, she clicked the button. Beep. Static. Then, he's useful, but honestly, he'll never be anything more than my fall guy if things go wrong. Her voice, crisp, casual, light with wine and arrogance. In the background, restaurant clatter, clinking glasses, probably the firm retreat in Napa last year. She never knew the recorder had been left in her purse. It had auto-triggered when the conversation started. She listened. Once, then twice. On the third play, she dropped it. Not dramatically, just enough to make it clatter on the hardwood like a final insult. She didn't speak, didn't ask for context, didn't deny it. Because what do you say when your own voice becomes the prosecution? I stepped closer. You weren't wrong, I said quietly. I was your fall guy, your safety net, your disposable tag-along for when the hard parts got too real. The man in the background. Pause. But even background noise leaves an echo. She blinked. Once, twice, and then it hit. Not just the words. The weight behind them. The realization that I hadn't just exposed her. I'd listened to her long before anyone else did. And that I'd been planning something quietly, ever since. I grabbed my jacket from the hook. No suitcase. No bags. Just the keys and the quiet satisfaction of someone who no longer needed to explain himself. At the door, I turned once more. You were right, I said. You did have a fall guy. And then, calmly, without looking back, I just decided I wasn't going to land there. I closed the door behind me, the final sound in a house that had long since stopped being home. Inside, her own voice still echoed from the recorder on the floor. Unforgettable, unforgivable, unspinnable. The sun rose without ceremony. The curtains were still drawn, but the light snuck through anyway, thin blades cutting across the empty side of the bed. The side I hadn't slept on in weeks. Not really. She woke alone, reached out instinctively. Only fabric, cold, and something else. An envelope. Plain, white, no return address, but thick. Her name written in my handwriting, block letters, careful strokes. The kind I used when filling out tax returns or legal documents. No embellishment, just truth. She sat up slowly, rubbed her eyes like the world might change when they reopened. It didn't. She opened the envelope. Divorce documents. Neatly filled out. Already signed. Every initial. Every page. On top of the stack was a yellow post-it note. 5 words. Enough to rip open everything she'd stitched shut. You spent years making me invisible. Below it, in smaller print. Now, I finally agree with you. Let's make it official. She didn't cry. Not at first. She just sat there, staring. The house was too quiet. No coffee brewing. No shower running. No distant keyboard clicks from the home office she never respected. No sarcastic remarks from the man she once called her fallback plan. Just silence. Total, echoing silence. She stood, clutching the paper like it might disintegrate if she let go. Walked to the hallway. No suitcase at the door. No note on the fridge. Just a set of keys missing from the hook, and the faint memory of footsteps that wouldn't return. She tried her phone. Scrolled through her contacts. Dad. Estranged. Greg. Fired her. Her ex. Buried under a compliance investigation. Her team. Tagged her in nothing. Every name she tapped turned to voicemail or read receipts without replies. The kind of digital rejection that doesn't scream, it shrugs. Because once the shine wears off, people don't cancel you loudly. They just stop calling. She sat on the edge of the bed. Same spot I'd occupied for 18 years. Birthdays. Illnesses. Promotions. Silences. Now it was hers. Only hers. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders like armor, like routine might offer comfort. It didn't. On the nightstand, her phone buzzed once more. Not a call. Not a text. A calendar reminder. Quarterly strategy review, 10 a.m. She laughed. Just once. Dry. Ugly. Then turned the phone face down and let it fall from her hand. Because the strategy now was surviving without the one person who knew where the bodies were buried, and still chose to leave anyway. In the stillness of that morning, for the first time in her life, there was no one left to blame, no one left to charm, no one left to tag along, just a quiet house, and the sound of nothing.